And welcome into This Life Matters. This is Drew, and that is Gigi. How you doing today, Gigi?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing good. I mean, it's Martin Luther King Day, which is one
Yep.
of my favorite days. So before we really kind of get into it, let's get into the quote that we start every show
Okay.
with, and it's really appropriate today considering it's Martin Luther King Day.
It absolutely is. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter.
Yeah, that one's on point today because we are still in our series, The Moral Conflicts of Life. We're going to be in this series for quite some time because we feel like we'll be able to really tackle a lot of just everyday conflicts, the different issues that we have in life. But um, today, I'm really excited to pick up this series because last week we started it off and we talked about it from a political standpoint. And sure enough, as we went through the week, we had some comments that's come out, and everyone has reacted to the comments from that the and we have to say just for journalistic integrity that the president allegedly said. So our show, it hit right on that because it was the whole point of like, hey, how do you if he had said that, how would you deal with the conflict of still wanting to support the overall values or whatever it is that you see in him as a president or in that office, or but not support the statement or even the heart behind the statement.
hmm
So
Yeah, absolutely. And I have been in an internal rant all weekend over this because it totally spoke. Our show spoke to exactly that. When a person has certain values and then other things happen, what do you do with that? How do you accept this? And so it really touched to the heart of what we were talking about last week in our show. And if you haven't seen it or heard it, you can hear it on iTunes and you can see it on Facebook. Can you see it on YouTube?
yeah, yeah,
If you want to go back and listen to that one first, that'd be great too. We'd like some of your comments. You can do that really through Facebook, probably easier. But yeah, I got really upset about what allegedly was said, and it spoke to what we talked about when something happens. Either the people that were in the room that said that's what was said, or the people that are in the room and said that's not what was said. If it was said, why are the people in the room saying it wasn't said? That's what I can't understand. And I don't for a doubt personally I don't doubt that it was said. So that's just coming from Gigi.
yeah. I think
Not
that,
this life matters as a
yeah.
whole, but from me. So I just don't, it's really hard to wrap my head around the support that some people can give to no matter who it is if the morality of a person that comes through whatever it is, not just this incident, is is not the same as your own, then that value it's incongruent. It feels incongruent internally, and that's how I'm feeling right now.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great things about last week's show is the fact that we all are going to have these different types of conflicts, and how do you deal with it? How do you deal with being able to say, okay, I don't agree with that, and I know for myself, had been to Haiti and everything, it's sort of like
Yeah.
I'm not personally on the end of had ever been a supporter, but it sent me into a conflict with just that emotional up and down, which is another thing to address, separate from just, where should I place my rage? It's more or less like at some point you get tired of having to be of being outraged, because you realize it results in nothing. Like it's just like
Yeah.
you kind of almost defeats you and makes you say, okay, yet again, nothing's going to be done. And what exactly do I expect to be done? Like,
Yeah.
why am I scrutinizing this situation, just knowing that next week there'll be another situation and then another one. And so for me, it's kind of beaten down the hope that fairness will come, that things will, be viewed through a lens of love. It kind of makes me feel for this brief moment that possibly hate is prevailing. And when you feel that way, you tend to look away. And I think
Yeah.
that's the unfortunate other response that some people have. Sometimes it's anger, then other times it's the response that I think I felt this week was just like I felt like it was a sorrow, and then it turned into just a almost an apathetic like, yeah, well, ain't nothing
Give
I can
up.
do about
Just a
it.
give
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
Why bother? That sort of thing. And, we talked about this in the past on other shows that when we keep being disappointed, then we either have to change our expectation so we're not disappointed, because if we don't, we'll keep being disappointed, and then it turns into anger and then in depression.
yeah,
And a lot of people feel that way. And there were probably a lot of people in the past 8 years of the national administration that felt that way as well. I mean, there's people on all everywhere that feel that way about a lot of things, whether it's politically, though. This is the reason that for so long people have been um, just ignoring politics. This is the reason why people don't vote.
yeah. It is. It's
Because
a,
they're so disappointed all the time. They think nothing is going to change. And now this happened, and it's, well, it's changed, that's for sure.
yeah, and I think that is the biggest issue right there is that we want to encourage you to have hope, but in moments like this, it's hard to say, "Hey, have hope." When even I myself feel hopeless when it comes to the issue of politics. I grew up as a young man with a strong passion for it, and now it's been reduced to me down to just like watching Access Hollywood. Like I said last week,
Yeah.
in a candid way, I would literally just because of the way things are now, I would almost consider voting. Like I said last week, I would consider voting for Oprah just because you know what? I'm not going to vote on politics. I'm going to vote on hope. Like that's it. I can't even
Mm-hmm.
depend on the idea that things will ever be fair and just. How about I just vote based off of what's going to make me feel good in this moment? And that in itself is an issue that I think most Americans are faced with, regardless of what end of the fence you're on, is that we don't expect our politicians to do anything for us. We know, in fact, they can't and will not. And even so matter of fact that they can't, because I believe they can,
They
because the
could if
system
they
is set up
wanted
where they
to.
could. We
Mm-hmm.
know for a fact there's a track history that they will not do what is right
Mm-hmm.
for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, we tend to turn our eye away from them, and then we end up, actually facing the grunt of the pain, like when we turn our back from
Yeah.
them, because we end up being affected by it.
Well, we are, because we elect people who are not trustworthy, and apparently all over the United States this last year in our state, and I don't know about yours where you live now, but in Oklahoma, in many states, there have been legislators that have had to resign nationally and in states that have been immoral and untrustworthy and have broken the law. The national ones that came up with the Me Too movement, I'm not seeing that they're being charged yet with things, but there are many state legislators in Oklahoma. I can't remember how many this year. It's over five, I believe. That's a lot to have been charged with crimes
Yeah. I,
of a sexual nature, of things like embezzlement, all those kind of things. So it is disappointing for people, and then people don't want to run for office because um, it's frustrating.
Yeah. Now, I've come to a place and a point, and we're going to move toward our actual show topic for today.
Oh,
But
I thought this was it.
we might as well stay with it. Well, it is along the same lines because,
Yes, it
like I said,
is.
we're in the series of the moral conflicts of life. And I think for me, along to respond to something you just said, I, like I told you, growing up with a passion for politics, I knew that at some point in my life that I would want to run. And then life hit me. It happened. And I did and said a lot of different
Mhm.
things that I felt as though, you know what? I could never run because this. But then now I live my life in a way where I'm more transparent. And so I've already beat people to the punch, so to speak, where
Mhm.
there's not, I'm an open book. There's not
You've
two
already
or three.
told them the bad stuff.
Yeah. And so with that being out there, if I ever feel an unction, I will indeed do
Uh-huh.
that because I do want to be a voice for people. And I do, I'll just always follow God's will on that and learn how to properly serve him because I don't want to do it for the popularity contest. I don't want to do it because it feels good in a moment. I want to do it when I know that I can effectively help create change.
Mhm.
And that means you may not ever run for office, or I may not ever run for office. That means if I'm going to be more effective fighting, through doing something like what we're doing right now, or just being one on one in someone's life, then I'm happy with that also. But as long as your bottom line is to affect change, I think that's what makes our society great. But once we start getting into the compromises and because I don't think any politician woke up and said, you know, I'm going to be corrupt today.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I hope not. But you know what you just said, I was thinking about something earlier when I was thinking about our show. And, it is amazing to me every time I talk about the show with someone who doesn't know about it. And I say I'm on it. And then I talk about you and the things that we have in common, the things that we're totally different about. Once I say I'm with a young African American male, it's like, oh, it's like a
what's
novel
that?
idea or something. And so this will bring us into what we were
Which is,
talking about
yeah,
today,
the conflict
which
of, okay. So
well,
the moral conflicts of life is the series, but today is, can love be bigger than fear? And
hmm
I think you hit on that perfectly because for me, it's the same thing in reverse, where as an African American, you're faced with something that's, and I don't know what the clinical term is, but I'm going to call this out for what it is in general in my community or how I see it. You can be looked at like you're an Uncle Tom. Now, I know from had read the book or I know that that's not in proper context. I'm not going to argue that point, but the saying is very real. What it
yeah.
means, the meaning behind that is very real. I have to actually literally watch what I say, what I do, and be conscious of it. Like that the phone's ringing right now.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where that's coming from because that's not my cell phone. And the other phone's supposed to be on fax.
Yeah, it's the age old landline. It never lets you down.
It
But
never lets us down.
but
Yeah.
that but that's the good thing about us doing a real show.
Yeah.
So I think for
So
me,
you were talking about for your community,
yeah, I have to
looking at you from your point of view on the show that we do, and you doing it
even
with me.
even outside of just the show, just knowing that love drives what I do, it tends to have to transcend color. It has to go beyond my color. It goes beyond my ethnicity, who I am, because I do identify myself as a black man, like unequivocally.
hmm
I'm not one of those people that'll tell you I'm something else first, because what has shaped me and what makes me what I am is a part of my culture, and I don't deny my culture ever. I'm so proud of my culture. So yes, I'm a Christian, I'm a pastor, I'm a black one though,
hmm
And so sometimes when people see me with you, or if when they saw me as a chaplain, when they see me in situations where I'm with people of the what has typically been on the opposite side of me, that's really for me. That's when those were conflicts of love that I had to let love win. I had to let love be bigger than my fear
hmm
of what people are going to say about me. People can call me this, that, or another, but I am going to be dedicated to making sure God's will is done in my life. So I'm going to be dedicated to love and let love be bigger than the fear of someone thinking that I'm a sellout or someone thinking that I'm not um, just as down for whatever cause. I just go about it in a different way. Like at the end of
hmm
the day, I want to see my community rise up and be proud and strong and love themselves just the same way I love myself. I want to see this for my community with a passion, but I don't go about it the same way that everyone else does. And I think that once you get a taste and you see, like, you actually see me working and doing what I do, you'll get it. You'll understand that God called me to do it that way. And then respect kind of comes in afterwards. But on the surface, yes, it is very difficult because people don't expect me to have a partnership, a friendship, and a love for you.
Hmm.
Um, I've even had people say it from the angle of, well, you're obviously doing this show with her because it must benefit you. And
Oh,
it's for
me?
me, you
Must
know, like,
benefit
no,
me
no,
or
it must
you?
benefit me. And it's like,
Oh.
I mean, it's we both benefit because it's a love, it's a friendship. Like, it's not like I'm looking at it like, okay, what connections, it's
Right.
we both bring
Well,
something to the
we
table.
both brought something to the table. That's for sure. And, when we're talking about this, can love be bigger than fear? Yes, it can, and it is, can be. But one of the things, when we get that idea going, how can I uh, make love bigger than fear? How can I choose love to look at a topic or a situation, an issue, a person, an event, anything? It's not always the most natural thing that to do. Maybe some people it can be more natural, but I think it really takes a real amount of uh, being proactive about doing that. Because a lot of times, the first thing we think about is the fear part of it, whatever it is.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, am I afraid to get in an airplane? Am I afraid to go skiing? Am I afraid to walk across the street? Am I afraid to go meet one of my neighbors because maybe they're a different culture than I am? Am I afraid to do whatever it is? That is a natural instinct, I think, more than love sometimes.
Can you picture going, and I'm gonna take it back to where our conversation started this, at the beginning of the show. Could you picture being a woman in the voting booth whose husband's view, your husband, her husband's view could be, we have to vote this direction because this is what we do. But
Well,
she's personally conflicted because she doesn't support someone who doesn't support her, but her family, her life, everything, her
mhm.
church, everyone is telling her, you need to vote this ticket. You have to vote that way. Could you picture
Well,
the
one thing,
turmoil?
the turmoil, but that's the thing about voting in the United States is, and not everywhere in the world is like this. We don't have to say who we voted for.
You don't, but then there's some people who are, like, and just let's bringing it
We could
into like,
cause a big family issue,
yeah,
big family discussion, yeah, but
you
we
bring it
don't
into
have to say it.
You don't. And I think that's the fun thing is we realize that you don't have to say it. Could you imagine this woman who doesn't want to lie? Never, and knows her husband, knows her family's gonna ask, well, did you get it done? Did you vote for this candidate? And they may have there were, I believe, honestly, there were women in Alabama who knew they didn't want to vote for Roy Moore, but knew that they had to. And I knew we
Well,
didn't want to say his
yeah,
name,
see,
but
I just don't get that because what we do is we set it up ahead of time to say, listen, uh,
you're talking
nobody,
boundaries, right? You're
we're
about
talking boundaries again. I'm going to go vote. I'm not going to tell you who I'm voting for.
right.
You don't need to tell me who you're voting for. In America, that's the way we get to
See,
do it.
you're talking a
But
healthy relationship.
yeah, we are. And I understand that, especially um, uh, in some relationships, that wouldn't fly. I understand that. And those are abusive relationships. If you're in one of those, that's not a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
Each person gets to think for themselves. Even we may not like the way they think, but you know, we may think their thinking is wrong, but that's the beauty of where we live is we do get to do that.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that how do you cope with that? Like that's one of the bigger issues that this person could have this much conflict because they feel they felt
Hmm.
so much pressure to go this direction. And then you've got love at the core of it, that they have a love for their family. See, that conflict kind of goes a different way. They feel like they, in order to be a part of, and that they feel that the
Mm-hmm.
love is built on circumstances, that I have to do this required thing in order to qualify for that love. And the statement that we're making unequivocally is that that's not love. That you
That's right.
can't qualify, you can't do something in order to get it. And you should be able to, it shouldn't, real love doesn't incite fear. Like, you shouldn't be in a situation. Real love is always, to me, because I know our question is, can love be bigger than it? When can love be bigger than fear? And to me, it's always, real love is always bigger than fear. It
Mm-hmm.
always, it just drives it out.
Yes. Yes. But it takes a different way of thinking,
Yeah,
and uh, and that leads to a different way of feeling. Actually, I don't know that I'm not sure we can change it by a feel. The feeling is harder to change, but it so we have our thinking, our feeling, and our doing. If we change one of those, the other two will follow. But sometimes the feeling, that's not what comes first. It's something else. It's like, you for instance, say that I had never had a conversation with a black man before, and I was really afraid to do that. But once I started having conversations with you, then could realize I don't have anything to be afraid of. So then, the all those three things would line up. That would be an example.
yeah. And you know what fear?
Um,
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
so if we start doing something, doing is the easiest one of those to change. We can decide to do, to have a behavior that's different. We can decide that. Sometimes we don't decide to think differently or feel differently, but behavior is the easiest thing to do differently. And once we do that, the other two can follow. So if we want to go, enlarge our world, and then we go do something that gives us more insight into whatever that other world is that we don't know about. And by doing that, then you meet people, you hear stories, you develop feelings, and you develop a different way of thinking about things. Like, that's why I say travel is so important, because if you're stuck in one place and that's your little world, it's hard to know other people. If you're stuck in one little, say you go home and you go to church and you go to your job, and all of that is homogenous, there's no difference, there's no nothing, then of course we're going to be afraid of all these other things that we haven't experienced. But once we, people ask me all the time about my daughter that lives in Abu Dhabi. And I say, yeah, I've been over there 4 times. I spend a month. I feel very safe there. I actually feel safer there than I do in the United States sometimes. And and I say, and people are alike everywhere we go. Every single country I've been in, every state I've been in, every place I go, I have that belief. We are exactly like each other.
Yeah, I would say for me, at the foundation of every fear, you'll find a lie. And for me, I
Mm-hmm.
found that it's always something that's either telling me, hey, you can't do this, you won't be successful at that, you're unqualified for this, all these different things that I really don't know. And it can cripple me. And so the point that I want to make with that is, even once I've made actions and I've spoken the truth over those lies, they still don't stop. The conflict still tries to battle
Mm-hmm.
internally, and sometimes we think, well, if we just act on love and we just do this, that won't be in the back of my mind anymore, and it will. There's times, no matter how many times we log on and we to do this show, and we post the show, it's always something in the back of my mind of like, will they like us this week, or or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
What the perception is, and I overcome it every week. overcome it every time because the love for doing it is greater. But that doesn't mean that the conflict that could pop up in your mind goes away. And I want to say that to encourage someone who may have even taken a job in corporate, who didn't see themselves that way. And every day they get up and there's an anxiety of, will I be perceived this way?
Mm.
Or even the entrepreneur who decided to just stop doing corporate, and said, okay, and they struggle with every day, am I good enough to succeed? And you are, because the idea that you aren't made for something great is a lie. Uh, that's not a truth at all. It's a lie, and that's fear. And you will succeed, and you can succeed. It's just a matter of you making sure that you do all that you can to just deafen out that lie and not give it any, you know, it's not real. So
Yeah, we have to really battle that. Everybody has to. I think that we battle that, uh, and maybe somebody hasn't put that word fear onto it.
hmm
Maybe it's doubt, self doubt,
hmm
um, hesitancy, something, but it's really fear.
yeah,
And so we have to change our viewpoint about whatever it is. And the only way to do that is, and love can be for ourselves. It's not always for everybody else. We can love ourselves enough to proactively stop ourselves from being afraid
yeah.
all the time,
This could spill
because it
over.
is paralyzing.
It is, and this could spill over into another show, and we'll have to cover this at some point in relationship to relationships, or in relation
Mm-hmm.
to relationships. It's sort of like a lot of times people will remain in a relationship just because they feel as though they're unqualified to leave it, and it could be the result of an abusive person telling them that they're unqualified, or their own insecurities and them feeling as though, and then there's some people who won't pursue a relationship that they've maybe fantasized or dreamed about. They'll never shoot their shot with the girl of their dreams or the guy of
Mm-hmm.
their dreams because they disqualify themselves for all these different reasons that may not even be close to the truth of life, the reality of things. So if you want your life to matter and you really want to get into it and you want to live your life and you want to have fun, you have to realize that your life matters and that you're going to have to overcome fear, whether it's stating your political point of views, uh, whether it's I'm going to stay silent about my political points of views,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm going to boldly protest or say something about my viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let fear cripple you and eat you up. Act on it, because today, and I'm going to finish out my part of the show by saying today of all days is a day that I feel is very important that you stand up for love and you stand up for what you have within you and you overcome that conflict, the conflicts you have with fear. Because you take a look at someone like Dr. King, and when you listen to his last few speeches, you could hear in his voice that you knew that he knew that the end was coming soon for him, but he still chose to continue to march. He still chose to fight for freedom and for the rights of the people of his community that he loved, and he pursued it with a passion that cost him his life, but it
Mm-hmm.
created a legacy of love that has transcended all hate in multiple communities and have driven people together. If it wasn't for his sacrifice, which really resulted in his life, him losing his life, if it wasn't for that sacrifice, me and Georgine wouldn't be able to do that right now. So he believed something that even other clergy didn't believe. He followed his belief system and what he read in the Word of God, and he believed that love was bigger, and he believed it to be true based off of what he knew, and he followed it and pursued it, and he was not okay with people using God to put hate out there. So he was at odds with people in the clergy community. He was even at odds with people in the African American community who didn't want to be nonviolent because they were tired of people being violent with them,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Mm-hmm.
wanted to hit back. He was at odds with them. He had um, but he faced all of those fears, the attack dogs, the fire hoses, and everything, and he stood up for what he felt was right. He stood up for love, and and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but I mean it in a real way, and I feel like it's something that he would say. There was nothing special about him. When it boils down to it, we all have the capacity to love on that level. God gave each and every one of us his image and gave each and every one of us the opportunity to do the exact same thing that Dr. King did. And so you need to channel that same love and that same passion that he has, because we all have it, and step out on that today.
Hmm. And I think that's a good place to end our show. And again, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And that's why we do this Life Matters.
Yeah.
So we want to thank you for listening and viewing us today. And we'll be back next week with another show about another moral conflict of our life. So see you next week.